Have you ever been working with a client and they have so much feedback that it actually delays the progress of the project? We're going to talk about how to overcome that in this episode of Freelance Jumpstart TV. Just to be totally honest, I know for me, I've had those times where I've worked with clients and they have feedback. I believe feedback is a good thing. Sometimes as a freelancer, people come to you for your expertise, for your knowledge, but it's tempting to think that you're always right. And the truth is, you're not always right. Not only that, if you're working with a client and they've invested a certain amount of money with you, then they have a right to give feedback. And also their insight may add tremendous value to the project you're working on. So feedback is a necessary step and it's an important step. But what do you do when the feedback just keeps coming and it seems like it's not going to stop? I've had projects to where I worked with clients and I wanted to accommodate them, so I continually worked with them and took on their feedback, but it really just made things harder for me because the deadline didn't change, but all these new things kept getting added and I was working harder, working longer to still meet the deadline. So how do you really overcome that? I found through experience and trial and error, the best way to overcome that is to create a pocket or create a window for the feedback session. And I call that revision cycle. A revision cycle or a revision round is a time in which the client can give feedback and I will take on however much feedback they give, and that counts as a round. And I'll do whatever they mention or make whatever changes they have within reason. And they get another chance, one final chance to give feedback before launch. So revision cycles really is the answer to solve the problem of endless client feedback, but there's some caveats to it. You should have a point in your process to where you're presenting your solution to your client, but you don't want to just present to them and say, look at what I did, what do you think? You want to add commentary to what it is that you're presenting. In other words, you have to explain certain design decisions that you chose to make. You have to explain certain reasons why you went with a certain website builder or website code base, or you have to explain why you took a certain angle if you're consulting, and just explain some of the reasoning of why you made certain decisions. Don't just put your work out there and let it float. Explain to the client how it relates to solving their problems and why you made those certain decisions. Really, before even presenting the solution to the client, expectations should have been set earlier. So prior to the client agreement being signed, you should have explained or have it in your contract or client agreement that revision cycles are coming and that will be an open time and a dedicated time that the client can take to give feedback. Make sure it's spelled out and defined properly in the client agreement and they understand what the expectations are. I know for me, I define a revision cycle as anytime you have feedback for me, I count that as a revision cycle. And for most web design projects that I do or graphic design projects that I do, it's 2 rounds. So I definitely recommend to the client, hey, take as much time as you want. Write down, if you have 12 things to say, write down those 12 things and capture them. But when you communicate with me, email or phone call or whatever the medium is, I'm going to count that as a round of revision. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to implement that work. And then once again, present the new changes that I've done and the new complete work to the client. Then they may get one final round of revisions prior to launch, but that's it really. For me, it's 2 rounds. Now, personally, I'm not limiting the revision cycles to 2 rounds because I just want to stop hearing from the client. I'm doing that because I want them to know that they really need to think about what it is that they want to change. And that I don't want them to change too much about the project because normally I worked with their goals in mind. And if they have all these new changes, then it may affect the end result of what they really wanted. So the 2 rounds is really to help the client focus on what they feel is important and not to get too caught up in the minor details. Now, 2 rounds is not the end of the world. You know, some client maybe exhaust those 2 rounds and they really have something more to say and they really have something more to add. I don't mind making changes if they're minute. However, if they're introducing new ideas or if they're trying to bring up something, I definitely recommend to them, hey, you've had your 2 revisions. You've had your 2 cycles. If you want more feedback to be implemented, I'm gonna have to charge you a fee. Again, the fee is not really for me to gain as much money as possible, but it's to help the client focus on what's important. And they'll take those 2 rounds more seriously if they know that if they exceed that, they're gonna have to pay extra for it. And once again, the fee for extra revision cycles, that should have been outlined in the client agreement. So they signed and I began the work knowing that if they extend past 2 rounds, that they're gonna have to pay for it. So there's no surprises here. Not only am I limiting the rounds of feedback, but also there is a time window and a deadline for the client to give feedback. So I may say, okay, I'm presenting my work to you. This is the solution. You get 2 rounds of feedback. Let me know what that feedback is in a certain time period. It may be 3 days, it may be a week, perhaps they need to digest it. Maybe they are traveling or something, whatever it may be, but I give them ample amount of time to look at it and give feedback. The deadline is in place for the feedback because there is still the overall deadline of launching the product. So, or launching the design, or launching the consulting advice, or there's some type of implementation that needs to take place and deadlines were set. So in order to meet all of those, I need feedback in a timely manner. I mentioned in another video my entire process and workflow in working with clients. So after the launch, I normally wait a little longer, maybe about a month or so, and I do a follow-up. That follow-up opportunity, once again, if the client has revisions left and they want to implement them, again, they'll be able to do so. We already launched. You saw how it was received. You saw some feedback from some different people. You got some reactions from people on the project. They see it, and you may have new ideas or you may have changes you want to make. That's perfectly fine if the revisions came after launch, just as long as you're still within your revision cycles. For me and my business, that's perfectly fine. If you haven't heard anything else that I said, definitely understand this. If you want to stop endless client feedback, you have to set revision cycles, and you have to set a deadline for those revisions to be received. And those expectations should have been set up in the client contract. If nothing else, maybe when you're meeting with the client face to face, mention this. Hey, I will give you an opportunity to get feedback. It's called a revision cycle. This is how many you get. If you haven't heard anything from this video, definitely understand this. If you want to stop endless client feedback, you need to institute revision cycles into your process. Set time and set deadlines for the client to give feedback. This will help the client focus. This will centralize feedback. And also it'll just help you more efficiently do the work and not have to go back multiple times and revisit it. In my process, I mentioned there's 2 revision cycles. Maybe you do something else. Maybe it's only 1 cycle. Perhaps you're a writer and you're gonna write the work and they're gonna do it, and then you don't want to change it, 5-6 times. Set a limit in place. Not only that, perhaps you're a consultant and you're giving advice. Okay, perhaps the revision cycle time is a time period in which the client can ask as many questions as they want, and you just spend the time to answer it. But whatever it is, definitely limit that time. Don't let it be never ending. This goes without saying, but I'm gonna have to say it because maybe someone hadn't thought of it. When you're taking in feedback, take the time to write it down. And when you institute those changes, remind the client of the changes you made. I definitely have worked with clients in which they've given me feedback and I made all of the changes, and then we meet again and they don't even remember what they initially said. So just as a helpful reminder to them, document that feedback and say, these are all the feedback points you've given me, and this is how I've addressed every point that you've mentioned. So you show as a reminder and you get credit for making those changes. Thank you once again for checking out this video. I greatly appreciate it. If you've liked anything that I said, definitely give me a thumbs up on this video and hit that subscribe button so you can get more videos like this. If you're listening on the podcast, definitely take the time to give this episode a review. And as always, there are show notes to this particular episode. You can go to freelancejumpstart.tv/29 and you can see the episode notes for this episode. Or it's this link right here if you're watching. Go to that link and I have all the show notes for you as always. But once again, thank you for checking out this video. I greatly appreciate it, and I will catch you in the next one. See ya.